Good evening and welcome to World's Meet the Makers event for the film No Time to Fail from America ReFramed. I am Christopher Hastings, executive producer for World. This is going to be an exciting night. Not only is this a Meet the Makers event, it's going to be a bit of a watch party. For those of you who are on World's YouTube channel for the first time, I need you to do something for me. I need you to subscribe right now. Because right after this event is over, No Time to Fail will stream, and I want to make sure you don't miss it. It's going to be its own stream. So if you are on World's YouTube channel for the first time, please do subscribe right now. Before we get started and before we get going with the conversation, I want to, for those of you who don't know about this film, I want to play the trailer so that you get a good idea of what you're about to see. Roll the trailer, please.
Elections, this is Rob.
It's that season again. It's election season.
We've never had an election like this. What we've done before is not going to cut it this time.
I gotta go. I have a very busy day. Where is the time?
Have you received the mail ballot?
I'm here to drop off 2 mail ballots.
This is my real mom speaking.
Virtual mom. The real mom gets home later.
I have no idea where I even am.
All right, 1 minute, guys.
Somebody needs to go over there and open that DS 200. All right, we're in trouble.
People are passionate, man. I tell you, I will vote at the polls. That's a good one.
You're seeing hate mail. You're seeing election officials across the country who are being threatened.
One holding a Trump flag, one holding an American flag, and one holding a sign.
I can't take all this anxiety anymore. This is just crazy.
You gotta do something like less stressful.
No, I liked my job. I have so many stories to tell you. We got this. We're gonna make it.
Yes, we
We're
are.
gonna make
We're gonna make it.
Right this way, the line's in that path right there. It's about a 5-minute way to get inside.
Oh, see, I told you it was beginning to look like Christmas.
3 weeks, Kathy, nobody will know us. We'll be back to being those anonymous people.
That's right. Yeah.
Being in the background's better.
Mm-hmm.
People are really touching me today. Do you see that old lady that was over there? 81 years old. First time voting. Come on now, guys.
We've got to figure out a way to make it work in the conditions that we're facing and still succeed in the end. Because we can't fail. Elections cannot fail. We can't fail the voters.
I really want this vote to count.
It will.
No Time to Fail gives voice to the experiences of election workers, our largely invisible yet completely indispensable workforce securing our voting polls and ballots. During this conversation, we'll hear from the filmmakers as well as guest election expert, and I'm going to introduce you to a new partner of World from Public Citizen, who is helping us present this event tonight. But before we introduce our special guests and our partners, I want to introduce you to the directors of No Time to Fail, Sara, Archambault, an award-winning director and producer, and Margo, Guernsey, also an award-winning director and producer, and also friends of World Channel. They each have had other films on America ReFramed in previous seasons, and we're so proud and happy to have them back again with this enticing film, No Time to Fail. Margo and Sara, how are you doing tonight?
We're doing great. We're so happy to be here. Margo, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was trying to say that it's great to be here with you.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm gonna just jump right in. Like I said to you, both of you have had films on America ReFramed before. Sara, you actually had a film that you just produced on last season. And Margo, Councilwoman, premiered a few years ago, and we've aired it a few times. And one of the things that I like about both of you as filmmakers is you tend to tell these stories about people who sometimes we miss, but they are part of the fabric of our lives. Just each of you, real quick, why do you tell these types of stories?
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I mean, I have to say that I think one of the things that happens with the majority of the media that we see throughout the country, kind of like your main channels for media, you tend to see the same kind of stories and the same kind of characters repeated time and time again. But there's a massive and diverse fabric that makes up the citizenry of this country, that makes up the stories that really inspire people and also make them feel seen. I think a lot of people don't feel seen in the stories that we typically see in the media today. And one of the things that I think, and I don't mean to speak for Margo, but I think that both Margo and I gravitate toward are those stories that are hidden, are those people who feel less seen within the storyscape of American media. We want to make sure that we are helping those stories find a purchase, find a place to connect to audiences, and then connect to other people where those stories can actually enliven them, make them feel whole and different and just respected in ways that a lot of most media culture makes invisible. Margo, would you say that you agree?
I would say that talking a little bit about this film in particular, when we started, the film was all about pulling back the curtain and looking at who are the people who do the work to make elections possible. We all go and vote, and very few of us, very, very, very few of us even spend time to think about what did it take to pull off this election. And to me, that's the problem of all of our society, and that we often don't think, what does it take to take the garbage away? What does it take to keep the rest right? And so in this case, is what does it take to pull off an election? And we went into this thinking that that was the story, that we were going to embed with our friends, who were running elections in Rhode Island and tell that story. And as we'll probably talk about later, it became a little bit of something else because of what happened in 2020. But that's where, that's where my filmmaking has always been, is what's invisible.
All right, well, talk a little bit about that. 2020 wasn't that long ago, but the two of you embed it within this community. How were you able to gain access?
I'll start quickly, and then Sara. It's access that's between trusted partners is often or always about being part of a community. And I lived in Rhode Island. I don't live in Rhode Island any longer, but my filmmaking roots and my other work roots prior to filmmaking are all very deep in Rhode Island. And Sara's from Rhode Island, which she'll talk about in a minute. And access was all about knowing people who trusted us, especially in the most difficult year of their lives, their most difficult work year of their lives. I don't think it could have happened any other way.
Yeah, I'm from Rhode Island. I currently live in Rhode Island, so I'm a lifer here. I've lived all over the country. I continue to come back here because of the quality of life. But, it was, as many of us know, those, particularly that first year of the COVID-19 pandemic was a vulnerable time. And as filmmakers, there were a lot of people who were pushing us to make a film that was, in a variety of different states that would provide access to election officials in a variety of different places. We just didn't think that was the right way to go because of two main reasons. One of them was because of what Margo just said, that earning access piece takes time, and this was going to be a time-sensitive issue. The second was because we wanted to go deep, and you can go deep in a place that you know well. So for us, our first entry point was through people who we knew who worked within the election system, who said, please do come. We will say that you are a trusted people, and we will introduce you to the people that you need to talk to in order to make this film work. But I will say that introduction was not an immediate green light. The thing that we had to do at every single location that we went to in Rhode Island was to earn trust again. And I would say one of the things that really meant something to us was, first of all, that they did welcome us in, but second of all, that one of the things that election administrators said to us time and time again, particularly the ones who participated in the film, was that transparency was the road to trust, and that they felt that if Americans could actually just see their work and see who they were, understand not just the labor, but that they're human beings, that they're neighbors and friends, that it might make a difference. And I think that we went into it with that kind of relationship with the people who appear in the film.
You know, one of the themes in this film, like you were just talking about, is the distrust that Americans have about elections, and that was totally amplified during that last campaign. And I think there's, you know, trickles of that as we head into 2024. I want to share this next clip and pick up the conversation after that. So let's roll the next clip.
Elections, this is Rob.
It's that season again. It's election season.
We've never had an election like this. What we've done before is not going to cut it this time.
I gotta go. I have a very busy day. Where is the time?
Have you received the mail ballot?
I'm here to drop off 2 mail ballots.
This is my real mom speaking.
Virtual mom. The real mom gets home later.
I have no idea where I even am.
All right, 1 minute, guys.
Somebody needs to go over there and open that DS-200. We're in trouble.
People are passionate, man. I tell you, I will vote at the polls. That's a good one.
You're seeing hate mail. You're seeing election officials across the country who are being threatened.
One holding a Trump flag, one holding an American flag, and one holding a sign.
I can't take all this anxiety anymore. This is just crazy.
You gotta do something like less stressful.
I want to remind everybody that No Time to Fail will be streaming in its entirety on our YouTube channel right after this conversation. So as you're listening to this conversation, if you haven't done so already, hit the like button and hit subscribe, because then I want you to be able to see the whole film in its entirety. Question for you, Margo and Sara. During the filming, did anyone express to you any fear for their safety as a result of response to the mail-in voting? Like, I was working on a film at the time called Black Vote Rising out of Milwaukee, and I just remember there were just people who were, it was very fraught, mail-in balloting. Voting, but did the election workers, you know, feel any for their safety with that?
You know, the issues with safety grew. We would see it creep in the longer we were filming. So it would start in September with frustration and lots of people just getting frustrated because they couldn't figure out what was going on, or they were getting wrong information. And by November, Rob Rock, for example, who's one of the main protagonists of the film, was on a call with other election officials around the country who were reporting death threats, if you remember 2020, this is when the stuff in Georgia started to get really intense. And people were, election officials in other parts of the country had to go into hiding and put their families in hiding. That did not happen in Rhode Island, but the tension around it continued to grow and grow. In Rhode Island, they got some casual, I don't use the word casual, they got some harassment, but it wasn't at the same level as in some of the other states.
It was a problem mostly of rhetoric more than direct threats. But I think one of the things that really came to light for Margo and I was that we were capturing a moment when the relationship between the American public and their understanding of elections was changing. When we were seeing in real time this gap between what people
Happy emergency voting day.
what people like really got of elections, what they really
oh Jesus,
what was something that they kind of knew, how do I say this, what they were expected and assumed of elections had a gap between what they actually knew as citizens. And in that gap, a lot of questions started coming up. A lot of disinformation started inspiring questions. And because of that gap, there was, I think the election workers that we saw, what they saw more often than threats in 2020 was a lot of questions, a lot of confusion, a lot of not understanding exactly how their vote would count or where their vote would count. But in addition to that, they saw things like threats coming through the mail, threats coming through email, but nothing kind of like directly to them that like where they felt like kind of bodily harm impending. I would say with the election officials that we are working with in the field right now, that is different. And I would say that the election workers around the country in 2020, particularly in swing states, were feeling something much more intense than what we were able to capture, but we were able to capture that cultural change.
You know, this film, for me, was an emotional experience. Like my grandmother, she's not with us anymore, but she was 92 years old and was still voting. And the last 2 cycles, she made sure we all went out and voted. And she had a lot of things that said it was going on in the climate. And I would think most people, when they see this and you go back to that time, they're gonna feel it. What kind of things are you hearing from the viewers who've seen this film? You guys had an amazing like impact campaign even before you got to this broadcast. What kind of things are you hearing from viewers of this film?
You know, that's such a great question, because I never expected that it would be such an emotional experience for folks. And it really, we hear that time and time and time again. In fact, we sometimes hear, you know, it was a great film, but I really, if I'm going to watch it again, I really need to prepare myself emotionally. I mean, it can be that much. And so we've started advising people, especially election officials, because election officials tell us it takes them straight back to that very traumatic time in their work lives. But really, we're getting that across the board. And I think it's because, you know, we all as citizens care so much about our rights. And in the film, you do see, as Sara was saying, you see that gap begin to grow between a collective understanding of what it means to be American and have the freedom to elect your own public officials, and then a gap between how do we preserve that, and how do lies and disinformation start to threaten that, and it feels very real.
I think the other thing too that we hear a lot, Chris, which you know, I think Margo was talking like a lot, because we've had a lot of election administrators watch this film. I think we're almost like a cult film of government workers across the country. But I think importantly, 2 things that we hear from public audiences: one, that this film's really funny and it's fun. And that one of the things that they really love about it is that that a lot of people are not here for a film about government administration. And then they come in and they're like, wait, this is interesting. Wait, these people are great. Wait, this film is really funny and fun. And so even though there's really serious subject matter being covered and really important kind of citizenship education included in this film, it's also kind of a fun film to watch. And then I think the other thing that we keep hearing from people consistently at every single screening is, how do we get every single American to watch this? Because I think there's so few tools for helping people understand how elections work. Because people consider government and ways in which people understand how government operates just like not that compelling. But when you actually can put some really good cinematic storytelling to it, it is compelling and it is interesting. And then you realize how essential it actually is for all of us to know these things. So 100% people are saying to us, how do we get more voters to watch this, particularly in the educational space?
Well,
And I just want to add, people love, sorry, I can, people
go ahead, Margo.
Yeah, I would say that people love the election officials who are in the film. I mean, they become film stars. They become your favorite neighbor next door. They really have gotten a hero's welcome, and they're so much fun to watch.
Cool. Well, I want to bring in a new friend, a new partner, Jonah Minkoff-Zern, who is co-director of Public Citizen Democracy Campaign. Jonah and his organization came on tonight to co-sponsor this event, and we are so happy that they did, because they are really, I believe they're fans of this film, right, Jonah?
Absolutely. The biggest.
Talk to me a little bit about what Public Citizens Democracy Campaign does and why this film do you think is important to your organization?
Sure. I mean, our campaign is working to preserve and build a stronger democracy. So that is in all elements. So working to overturn the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling that allows unlimited funds in our election, to defending against attacks on election officials and attacks on the freedom to vote that are taking place around the country, to restoring the vote to people who are incarcerated. We want to work in all elements to build a better democracy and to defend our democracy when it's under attack. And this film really gets at the heart of that issue today, because I guess when I started this job, I never really thought that I would be working to defend election officials, right? That just seemed like a natural kind of behind the scenes part of our election. It never seemed like an issue that we would have to be addressing on such a big scale. And it's really sad that we have to do that, but also empowering that election officials are being held up as heroes, that we are seeing the work that they do, and that we're working to provide them that support by passing state laws to protect them, and also just by acting to honor them in little ways. Like we had events where people brought them balloons and cards to thank them for their work around the country. So I think it's a sad moment that we have to be fighting to protect our election officials, but it can be an opportunity for us to give the honor that these people are due, that these heroes and who were formerly silent are due.
I want to move on to this topic of misinformation, and more specifically disinformation that the film lays out related to the 2020 election. Let's show the next clip, the disinformation clip.
Hi, can I help you? Someone just called the box out front. It's too full. We're gonna need 2 boxes. Uh-oh, we're gonna need more than 2.
You can come inside the office and drop it off in here, because if you don't trust, that's something different, okay?
We had to empty that once already. They need to send us 2 at a time because someone called and said the drop box out front is full. We can't get our ballots,
Right, so
which wasn't true. There was still a little bit of space.
Yeah. I'm looking to see if anybody's tweeted or anything about a ballot drop box being full. That bothers me that someone would immediately go to the press about something like that. People are gonna say what they want. If they're looking for something to complain about, they're gonna make it up, or they're gonna be blind to it and then say something that's just not true. Drop box was full. It wasn't full. Literally, the things that were within our control and not in our control. That's something that's not in our control, but at the same time, I don't want disinformation to be out there, because the last thing we need now is people to start distrusting the drop box.
This issue about the Dropbox in 2020, it's going to come up again, and in people's minds. And what I've always found funny about the issue is that Dropbox weren't new in 2020. Like we've always had the ability, the right to do mail-in ballots depending on where you live. And I personally don't know what we can do. I know as a journalist, we want to continue to tell that story, to remind people that, and if your community has it, it's your right to do that. But Jonah, what are the efforts your organization taking on to help with reforming this? Because there's a lot of things going on right now where there's some areas are rolling back the ability to have Dropbox, or changing the What are you guys doing to sort of inform people?
What we're working on a few different levels. One is just basically working with broad coalitions of organizations to help people understand how it works and how the election process works, and that vote by mail is safe and people should vote by mail if that's the way that works for them. And then we're working to pass laws when we can to expand the freedom to vote, to make sure people have access to drop boxes, to make sure people have access to voting early, to make sure people are automatically registered when they interact with different agencies, to restore the vote to people, but to people who are incarcerated. Also, we're working to defend against attacks. And in states like Georgia or Texas or North Carolina that are working to pass laws to roll back the freedom to vote, to roll back access to the ballot or ways that people are voting, we're working to try to defeat them. And then we work with amazing attorneys who are working in court to try to stop them. And then ultimately, we need to pass federal legislation. We need to restore the Voting Rights Act the way it was before the Shelby Supreme Court ruling, so it protects against intentional discriminatory actions that these states are taking, or actions that states are taking that really at the root of them are about denying voters of color the ability to vote. And then also we need to pass best practices, really something that should be simple and nonpartisan, but has become a partisan issue. We need to pass federal legislation to ensure the freedom to vote, the Freedom to Vote Act that came so close to passing in this last session. And that's something we need to do.
One more question, Jonah. And this is super simple, I think a basic question. How can the public support election officials? I would think when people see this movie and they understand the difference between the poll workers and the election workers, the ones who work on this year round, that they are being made aware of something that they didn't see. Now that they know, how can they support election officials?
I think there's a few ways. First, individually, people can call the office and say thank you. They can deliver a thank you card to help people's spirits. There are some states where 50% of election officials have left because of threats and harassment that they're receiving. 50%. And this isn't what they got into. These are grandmas and grandpas in some cases who just wanted to be part of our democracy. And so we need to thank them and show them that they're valued and that we trust them and care about them. We need to pass laws that states are passing all over the country, bipartisan laws in states everywhere from North Dakota to Maine to Washington to Vermont are passing laws to protect election officials, to make it a crime to threaten and harass election officials, to prevent against doxing of election officials. We need to pass these laws. And these are things, again, that I never thought I would be working to do, but really are essential right now to educate people and to make sure that there's an accountability for people who are taking these horrible actions.
Sara, Margo, talk to me about the reactions that you've heard from election workers. I asked you about people who watched the film, but specifically, I would think you've got a fan club of election workers who have shared what they thought about the film. What have they told you?
I want to first react to one thing that Jonah just said about how we can support our election officials. Today, I was spent all day with some election officials. And, the reality is the environment of harassment they're in. It's like when you go to the supermarket and somebody recognizes you and mutters under their breath, "Oh, so this is how you stuff the ballot boxes." It's that kind of very insidious, but it's haunting. Or you get one email, traitor, I'm going to sue you and take your house because you stole the election. So these things, they're not real. They're coming from somebody who is, but it's insidious. And what they were talking about to me today is how to counter that, they need 10 or 15 thank you for your jobs, because the harassment comments are just hard to rub off your shoulder, but the more love they get, it really helps them. So I just want to emphasize, it might sound like a small thing, but in this harassing environment, the calls and the thank you and the flowers really, really mean a lot. So that's my little stump speech about, but yeah, election officials they also, they say to me, so now I'm in a state that's not my home state, and why would they trust me? And it's all about feeling seen in that film, in our film. Margo, you guys did it. You showed everyone what we do. That is why you're here. That is why we trust you. And they say it directly. They say it in so many ways. So yeah, we do have a fan club among election officials.
I want to remind everybody that in about 30 minutes, this film will be streaming on our YouTube channel and it will be broadcasting on World Channel. So if you are here watching me right now live on our YouTube channel, do me a favor, subscribe and call your mother and tell her to subscribe and call your friend and ask them to subscribe and watch this film and share it when it goes live at 8 o'clock. And if you're watching it on World Channel and it starts at 8 o'clock, please do still watch it because people still watch TV. I want to bring in our next guest, somebody who I just got a chance to meet, but I had read her bio earlier this week and was super impressed. Her name is Tina Barton, and she is an elections expert. Tina, what's your response to the film, and what have you heard so far in this discussion what triggers your thoughts as you watch this film?
Yeah, well, I think the word trigger is actually a really good word. The first time I went to watch the film, I couldn't watch it all the way through, and I think that's really, like it was mentioned earlier, it's something that takes us back to that time and that space that a lot of us are still working through. Right, we're still working through kind of that personal trauma that we experienced, and some have continued to experience over the last few years that hasn't let up. That what they've experienced is still ongoing. And so to watch it, to hear the mom say, "I'm your virtual mom, your real mom will be home later." I think, a lot of election officials are females that are working in that space. We are moms, and we've been there, right? Like, I know what it's like to work those really long hours and not to get to go home to my kids until it's really late. And like, I feel emotional right now, just like talking about it. It's those kinds of things, just seeing ourselves in those moments and recognizing that for the joy, we've been there, we've done that, we've had that happen to us. Also, the anger sometimes that you feel, the exhaustion, all of those things. It's all of us seeing ourselves in that moment. While it might be someone else in that film, it's really us there too. We're right there in that film also, whether it's actually our face showing or not. Our spirit and the moments that we've lived are all being lived out in front of us.
You were involved in producing 30 resources, so I've read, providing best practices related to personal security of election workers. Is this, and this is going to sound crass, but is this a real concern about personal safety of our election workers? And I ask you this because you have a better idea of the landscape that we're in today as an expert. And I'm wondering, can you talk to me a little bit more about what's that risk here?
Oh, the risk is absolute. I mean, there is no question that there's risk in this. And my whole job right now is I'm work with the elections group, and I'm very highly focused on the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, traveling the country right now, helping election officials work with their local law enforcement, their state, their FBI election crime coordinators, to be prepared for events that could possibly happen to them as individuals, as well as their teams. Could happen at one of their polling locations, at a ballot box, any of those things, working through scenarios. We are actively engaging with election officials across the country because it's a very real environment that we're in. I personally had my life threatened after the 2020 election cycle. Had an individual who, said that when I least expected that they would surround me, that, millions of patriots would find me, there would be no police agency big enough to protect me, and that, I deserved a knife to my throat, all of these things. And they attack your family. They talk about, they use very sexual language in their threats. And there is a concerted effort to psychologically impact the election workers that are out there, whether they intend to carry through on these physical threats or not. I hope they don't. But the psychological impact is lifelong. it is something that that election official will never forget when someone on the other end of the phone says something like that to them, calls them a sexual name, says they're going to rape their daughters. When they hear those things, when they see those things, it is absolutely real. It's alive. It continues to be promoted by those who have followings and those who have authority, who hold political positions, and those who continue to promote that type of language and rhetoric in social spaces. It only exacerbates the challenges that these election officials are facing to stay safe, for their families to stay safe.
No Time to Fail is premiering immediately after this discussion. It also addresses the hate and ritual address at election workers by voters. I want to take you all take a look at this next clip. Let's play the clip.
Yep, thank you. All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
People are passionate, man. I tell you. So these are mail ballot applications that have come back from voters, basically saying that they are not going to be voting by mail. Like this one here, no mail ballot, be American, go to the polls. I'm not sure what being American has to do with going to the polls as opposed to voting by mail. But I will vote at the polls. Eat. That's a good one. That's a nice. And they have their names on them too, which is pretty cool. I will crawl before I mail in my vote, which is an interesting image. The end is near. Here's a good one. The end is near. Seek the truth while it may be found. It is written. So the end is near, according to Mr. O'Neill from Cranston. Not sure why people get so upset about the mail ballots, but the reason why we do this is that people can have those opinions.
Sara, Margo, did you predict some of these exchanges when you were beginning this film?
I would say absolutely not. I mean, when we first went into the film and into the filmmaking process, we were really interested in just finding out how an election could be administered during a pandemic. We did not expect to find the threat environment or the disinformation environment that we discovered. It was one, I think, our curiosity that led us to this space was one of civic inquiry. But not an examination of what was kind of like pulling apart at the seams in terms of our social fabric. But I would say that unfortunately, that is what we found. I want to speak a little bit to what Tina was mentioning. And Tina, thank you so much for everything you've done for elections. And I am so sorry about those harms that you have suffered, that your family has suffered. I do want to say that much of what Tina has experienced as an election official is, or when she was serving as an election official, though I'm sure she reported it to the Justice Department, much of it is not actionable. Much of it falls within the purview of free speech, and therefore is something that actually can happen, but does not change the feeling, the environment of threat that most election officials are now feeling. They are now feeling that they are a vulnerable population. And that is one, and I think Margo pointed this out earlier, this is what is so insidious about this threat environment, is that it undermines our democracy, but is not necessarily actionable by law. And so I think as we are thinking, and just to get back to what Jonah was mentioning, what can we do to actually help in this kind of situation? I think a thing that I'm sure Margo is sick of hearing me say, but democracy is not a spectator sport. We can't just stand by on the sidelines and trust everything is going to be okay. I think those people who are coming from a perspective of disenchantment, of wanting to try to undermine elections, they need to be met with an army of citizens who believe in this process, who believe in what American democracy means and stands for, and who understands that there is a vulnerable workforce who actually stands between us and the major threat that is the undoing of democracy. And we need to honor them, respect them, but we need to actively argue for them in public situations. We need to volunteer at the polls. We need to be part of a force that enlivens, that emboldens, and that encourages their work. So my feeling is that we can no longer sit at the sidelines. We can no longer be complacent and think it's just all going to be fine. It only will be fine if we all become stewards of the democracy that we hold dear.
I would say too, Sara, that this is also, yes, your everyday citizen, getting them engaged, getting them involved, right? A man with an experience is never at the mercy of a man with an argument. So if you've actually done something, you've served as a poll worker, you're armed with actual facts to go out there and talk about the way it works. I would also say if you're in a position of authority, if you have a following, if you have a constituency, you are someone who's been elected, any position of power, you have a responsibility too, to make sure that the words that are coming out of your mouth are not inciting violence against these people, against these election workers who are out there just trying to do their jobs with the best of their ability, doing it with integrity, doing it with truth, the transparency that they're trying to put forward. If you have that kind of power in your following, you should be using that for good and not trying to undermine our democracy and those who are serving it.
You know, as I'm sitting here looking at this film and remembering January 6th and the energy that sort of set that off, do you? And again, I'm not trying to put any gas on a fire that's there, but do you all see that possibly happening again?
I think, I think like Tina and Sara were just saying, we have to be the stewards of democracy, and we have to organize. Another thing we can do in addition to being poll workers and passing laws to protect election officials is showing this video. There was just a whole theater full of people who saw it in New Hampshire. We're talking to people in Ohio and Iowa. I think are going to do it on January 6th this year. This is a great way to educate people and build a movement of people to organize on this. But I think it could happen again. And I think the way that we stop it is by organizing people, by educating people, by making them feel the human connection to the attack on democracy. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And how do we make sure people feel connected in a way that it doesn't happen again? I think whether it does or not is really up to us and the work that we do together.
Cool. So one of the goals of Meet the Makers is I want to make sure that I make space for folks who are in the YouTube chat. And if you're in the YouTube chat, if you're dropping questions, you have better subscribe to the channel too. And so we got one question in so far from KP. And I'm not sure if it's who they or who they are, but it's KP. How do you best recruit election workers to work future elections when they are facing the threat of physical violence? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think a lot of it is appealing to individuals who have a sense of service, who have a passion to serve in some way for their country, to appeal to their patriotism in their country. I work a lot with the Vet the Vote group. The Vet the Vote group specifically is working with veterans who already have served in some way in their country. They have a strong drive to do that. And so appealing to people who have a sense of service, a sense of community, and a passion and a patriotism for their country.
What does it take to be an election worker? Like, is there a training? Do you go to school for it? Like, I hadn't really thought about this, but like a cop, you got to go to the police academy. What's the how? Like, I grow up, I want to go be an election worker. How do I do it?
Well, I would say there are two different things you're talking about here. An election worker and an election administrator can be two different things, right? An election worker in Michigan, for instance, where I was the city clerk, you could be a high school student and be an election worker. And so to be an election worker, you just had to be a citizen, and you could fill out an application and go through a process, right? And so you had to be a Michigan resident, that sort of thing. So there were these qualifications that were internal that you had to meet, and each state has those qualifications. If it comes for an election administrator, that could go all the way from somebody who just gets elected. They're elected for that position. It could be someone who's appointed by their council, by their commission to serve in that position. So it could be an appointment, but there are certification programs out there. There are certifications through like the Election Center. You can get Sara certified. There are a couple different universities that run programs, University of Minnesota. There are also a lot of associations across the country that are associations for clerks, like the Florida, clerks, election professionals. The Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks has a certification, the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. So there are various organizations that you can get certified through to be a clerk or an election administrator. So there are different options out there, but that's more on the administration side and the clerk side of it. But the election worker side, it's really a lot less restrictions on there. And you can contact your local election official. Most of them have their applications out on their website.
I want to add to that, if that's okay, Chris.
Right.
One of the things, I will say that like when Margo and I started this film, we did not know that there was an entire career that you could have as an election administrator. We understood what poll workers were. We understood what like kind of the day laborers of election.
And they're two different things, right?
They're two different things. So a lot of people who are your election administrators are your city clerks. They are issuing your dog license. They're issuing your hunting license. They are in charge of your birth and death certificate. And they also administer your elections. So these are like civil servants across the country who are doing multiple jobs where elections are just one part of what they're actually delivering to the American public. I want to say, just to add to this, that this is a religiously nonpartisan community. And this is, to me, what's one thing that we have not talked about in this conversation, but I think is actually critical, which is that it's being slammed as kind of a partisan space, but that the dedicated election administration workforce of this country is a nonpartisan space and wants to remain as such. The more that we're making partisan this kind of civil service, I think is one of the major kind of narrative problems that's happening in the public sphere. I think also there is a campaign not just to attack election administrations, but to attack civil service itself as a nonpartisan and essential workforce for this country. And it's something that we all need to work to preserve. It's something that actually has helped this country grow. It's helped this country thrive. And it's something that we actually need to continue, but in particular in the election space.
Yeah, if I could
get a little passionate, sorry.
No, I love that. If I could just add on to that real quickly, that with all the division we have in our country, right? Even division within families, partisan politics and all of that. The most bipartisan thing that we do in this country happens at the elections. It happens when a Democrat and a Republican come together. They work as a chair and a co-chair, or judges as precinct workers. All of these things, you have all this bipartisan involvement with election workers. And it is the one thing that we still can hold tight to in this country, where we have bipartisan effort to see a successful outcome. Election officials, like she said, we're like the most nonpartisan group. Even for those who have to be elected on a party line, many have been my friends for years. And if it weren't for the fact that they were elected along a partisan line, I would have no idea what their politics are. That is not the road that we walk down. We are there for fairness, integrity, transparency, all of that for the American voter. And we don't care what party you are. We like to say at the elections group that we champion the process and not the outcome.
So, Jonah, you want to say something?
Sure. I just would add, if we want people to be election workers, to get people active right away, whether they're students or whoever they are. And I think Power the Polls is a fantastic organization, powerthepolls.org, to get people involved wherever you are, where people can go to the site and sign up to be poll workers and figure out ways they can engage. So I just want to put a plug for that organization. We actually were hoping they could be here tonight and they couldn't, but they are doing really the work of building an army or a team or a community of people who care about this and are involved in taking that first step to get involved. So that's Power of the Polls is a great way to get people to sign up to be poll workers and get them involved.
Well, I'm pretty sure this won't be our last conversation. I think I've mentioned in other panel conversations, democracy is one of World Channel's themes. I hate when I hear people say democracy is at risk. I think there's a lot of hope in democracy. And so I've made it one of our ongoing themes. So I'm pretty sure we're going to have some other conversations. While you're on that YouTube channel, remember, No Time to Fail, start streaming at 8 o'clock, click that button. Kimberly Jones, who has a question, I'm going to ask your question, but make sure you go hit that button. Most important thing here is I think there's a lot of hope in democracy. So we're going to be talking about this again. But to Kimberly's question, and it's a little bit different. She goes, what advice do you have about motivating people who are on their couch, despairing, traveling out to swing states? And I just think people despair about going out their house anyway, to knock on doors. And I think her question is more about campaigning. But I think the question for me is, how do you get people to participate? You know, like, I think there are different ways for people to civically participate. How do you encourage people to just move from watching these stories to actually getting involved?
I think this just comes back to the conversation we started to have about getting people involved in this career in the first place and civic education. So the one piece that we haven't touched on yet is, in the long run, disinformation can creep amongst us when we're not educated about how our government works.
Yes.
So, I mean, really, if we can start making sure that all of our kids are coming up with understanding the government better, then they're going to want to be champions of democracy, just like all of us on this call. And so I think civic education is the place to go. I do hope that teachers embrace the film and are interested in having conversations about it in classrooms. It's, you know, could hopefully be more fun maybe than reading a textbook. Can spark some fun conversations about what's happening on screen.
I think one thing I would add to that too is we all need like a little bit of an attitude shift. All of us are overtaxed. All of us are juggling kind of kids and work and obligations and family and all of these kinds of things. I got a really great piece of advice from a wonderful filmmaker and activist I know named Esther Robinson. And at one point she said, you need to remember that this is not a marathon that you're running alone. We are all running a relay race. You have to know when you can tap in and you hand off the baton. I think when it comes to that fear of getting involved, or that I'm not doing enough, or what little can I do, to know that any little piece of the race that you're able to run helps everyone else complete the race. So even if it's just for you, going to one house, testing out if that's the right thing for you. Maybe for someone else, it's making phone calls. Maybe for someone else, it's volunteering as a poll worker. Any little piece of the race that you can run does a service to the whole.
Noting today is vote early day for the election. So just want to honor that and the work that everyone is doing right now to get out the vote for the election, for this November's election. Or I guess it's October and November election, because people can vote in October. We want to make sure the election day is now many days. But we're working with the Leadership Conference in Civil and Human Rights and League of Women Voters and Declaration for American Democracy to do a textathon, a nonpartisan textathon to voters in Mississippi on November 2nd. And there are groups doing like that all the time right now through the election. There are so many different ways that we can be involved from where we're sitting. We can write postcards, we can send texts, we can make phone calls. We can go to the States and knock on doors, but we don't have to do that to be involved. We can use Reach, which is a great tool to peer-to-peer text. Our world is very interconnected and our nation is more and more interconnected. So we have a lot of power through social media. We can share the video tonight to get people involved and to build that movement of people who are going to make things right.
Hey, No Time to Fail is going to stream in 5 minutes. And let me just tell you a little secret. You know, this is how much I love democracy. I'm actually in Eastern Germany right now. And I'm talking about democracy in Eastern Germany. And for those of you who are history buffs, maybe about 30 years ago, this wasn't like this. This wasn't a democracy. And so it just hit me. I was like, wait, I'm in former DDR and I'm talking about democracy. So there's hope in democracy, y'all. Go hit that like button, subscribe now, because if I can stay up in Eastern Germany after I've been talking to filmmakers all day to talk to more filmmakers about their film that's going to be streaming on my platform in 5 minutes, then you can go watch this film and learn about democracy and what it looks like in 2024. I'm going to give everybody one final word, and then I'm going to encourage everybody to go to the stream, starting with you, Margo. Final word before we head off to watch your film.
Our election system is incredibly safe. There are redundancies in place at every step of the way in every city, town, and county of our country. It's incredibly secure. And if you have questions about it, go down to your local town hall and ask your local election official how it works in your town. And I hope you enjoy the film.
Sara, Archambault.
Every single person that you see in this film is replicated in every city and town across the United States. Every single place you see, these election administrators are your friends, they're your neighbors, they're your cousins, your aunts and uncles. These are folks in your community. Please get to know them. Elections are deeply local. 100% local, and therefore you can have a voice. So please get to know your election workers, and I hope you enjoy the film.
Tina Barton, my new personal elections expert.
I would just maybe like to say a few words for the election officials that will be watching this, and just say, for every negative are supporting you, who believe in you, who believe in the system, who want you to succeed, who want our government and our country to succeed, our democracy to succeed, because we are still the greatest country in the entire world, and you are still the greatest election administrators in this entire world. We believe in you, you have this, you can do this, and we are all here for you as a collective community.
And Jonah, one final word from you.
Well, right on to all that. And you know, this is our moment. We can build a multiracial, multi-generational democracy that they're scared of, that they're trying to stop and stand in our way. And this is our moment to make that happen. And you're sitting there, Chris, in a former nation that did not have democracy, that did not have the freedoms that we have. And people fought and won those. And we have to do that here. We have to pass laws to protect election officials. We have to go out and thank them. We have to sign up to be poll workers. We have to get people out to vote in this November's election and make sure that they can participate and know how to participate. You know, this is our moment as a nation to make our nation into something greater. And we're in a point of struggle, but we can overcome that struggle and we can build something much better.
All right, Jonah, Tina, Margo, Sara, thank you for joining me on Meet the Makers. Please, if you are watching on the YouTube channel right now, stay on the YouTube channel, share this link, share this conversation, share the film that's going to be streaming on YouTube in about 60 seconds. As Sharon Wong tells me, it goes live right at 8. So please do subscribe to it. If you are on World Channel, it is going to be playing on World Channel. The film is streaming in the PBS app. In another week or so, the film is going to be out on Amazon and iTunes. We've been working to get this film in as many places as we can. For those of you who want to bring this film to your community, it is available for community screening, and I encourage you to go to worldchannel.org and share your name and let us know if you would like to screen this in your church, or your synagogue, or wherever you convene folks. We think this is a film that a lot of people should see as we head into 2024. I am Christopher Hastings. I'm executive producer for World Channel, and it is, think it's about 1 o'clock here. And as I've already seen the film, I may just go to bed. But to the rest of you on the East Coast, on the West Coast in the US, please watch the film, and we will see you next time on World Channel.